Hello. My name's Angel Noxidire. I'm so happy you've joined me here. Actually, if you'd like to stay, there's something I've been wanting to talk about. For whatever reason, I've always been a little obsessed with the concept of adaptation. I often have to stop myself from daydreaming during a movie about how I would have done it, or I would change it for a stage musical, or what have you. Perhaps it comes from a need to control, or a desire to fit something into my understanding. Or maybe the simple want to figure myself out via the things I love. Maybe it's just plain vanity. As with all things in life, there doesn't need to be a single, clean answer, despite how, as with all things in life, I desperately try to find it. It seems to me, though, that I'm not nearly the only one. We live in an era positively surrounded by remakes and reimaginings. Now, I'm very aware that a good deal of this is due to a non-artistically based attempt at a profit, but the point stands that we as a species have a fondness for seeing things we know and love in a new light. There's a story I'm fairly certain you're quite familiar with, and it's one that's assuredly no stranger to adaptation. L. Frank Baum's The Wizard of Oz. There's a character, though, who goes unfeatured and unmentioned in the vast majority of adaptations and media surrounding the Land of Oz. There's a very good reason for that, of course, as she's introduced in the second book of the series, rather than the iconic first novel. However, I think it's a mighty disservice to ignore her, for the simple reason that she is absolutely fascinating. She is the young ruler of Oz, Princess Ozma. And, if I might, I'd love to discuss her with you. Before we get to Ozma, however, we need to talk about a young lad named Tip. Tipitarius, or Tip for short, was introduced in 1904 in the second novel of the Oz series, The Marvelous Land of Oz. Now, from the time that Tip was a babe, he lived with and worked in servitude for an old witch named Mombi, who, I'm sorry to say, was not at all kind to the boy. After Mombi threatens to turn Tip to stone, the lad, reasonably, decides to run away. In his adventure after leaving, he comes to learn of the lost heir to the throne of Oz, a princess named Ozma, who went missing when she was just a baby after the wizard had risen to power. After learning Mombi had something to do with it, the good witch Glinda forces her to come forth with the princess's whereabouts. It's here that Mombi reveals that the wizard had given her the baby and entreated her to hide it, so the witch used her magic to turn the princess into a boy. In the big twist of the book, the lost princess turns out to have been the plucky boy hero we've been following for the whole story. In the end, Mombi returns Ozma to her original form, and for the rest of the series, she acts as the wise and gentle ruler of Oz. Now, you might be connecting Ozma's story to that of a transgender individual, and I personally think you're quite correct in doing so. The way I think of it, Ozma is an early transgender icon of the 20th century. At least, kind of. The strange thing about her is that the scenario is so inherently trans, but the character has to stay only metaphorically trans, because of the way her feelings are written. You see, Ozma never shows discomfort with her previous male identity, nor a desire to go back to her female one. The hesitancy she expresses before the spell is reversed lies not in anxiety about her gender, but in how her friends will see her differently, or that she won't be able to go on adventures as a princess. And when she does become a princess, she expresses again no uncomfortability being a girl, and no desire for her life as a boy. She is instantly more feminine and gentle the moment she becomes a girl. Baum depicts gender as at once something rigid with specific roles and as entirely fluid, with one being able to adhere to either role depending on whatever society dictates. In the story Baum wanted to tell, Ozma is less of a trans character and more of a cisgender girl who was turned into a cisgender boy and then back into a cisgender girl. But what about the story we tell? Just for a bit of fun, let's you and me take a stroll down adaptation lane. Our modern-day understandings of gender are quite a bit different than those of the 1900s, so it makes sense for Ozma's story to change a bit in a future adaptation of The Marvelous Land of Oz and the later books in the Oz series. But to reach an understanding of Ozma, let's first understand what we know about gender nonconformity. Is nonconformity a product of the poorly traced arbitrary lines of female and male? Or is it the very inherency of gender those lines pretend to be? If the latter, how could someone know that they fit into a box that just wasn't the one they were assigned? Some people experience so much discomfort in the existence of labels, and others can have so much joy in finding the one that fits them. In short, it's complicated. So really, just find what feels like you. It seems to me, then, that Ozma in this new story should have agency over her identity. She should have the ability to find what feels like her. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that she should exclaim that she feels like a girl or a boy, or that she should prescribe herself one of our modern-day labels. But you see, in the original tale, Tip is given no choice in turning back into Ozma. She even outright says she doesn't want to be a girl. She asks Glinda that if she doesn't like being a girl, could she go back to being Tip? To which she is told by Glinda that the witch cannot perform transformation magic, and therefore Ozma would stay Ozma forever, even if she hates it. One way we could take Ozma's character is to simply have her want to be a girl. There's a very nice ongoing webcomic out there called Yellow Brick Ramble by Daisy McGuire that does just that. Ozma displays a clear discomfort in her male position, and decides herself to live as a girl without her true, royal, female identity ever being made clear to her, and chooses the name Ozma on her own. But there's a reason why this version of Ozma's story works well in Yellow Brick Ramble, but perhaps not in our adaptation. See, as of the time of our conversation here, the comic has yet to show itself to adhere to the original's plot of Ozma having been the true heir to the throne of Oz, and I suspect her having been born a girl is not the direction it's going in. In other words, it could very well be that Ozma wasn't born female. So, in the story McGuire tells, Ozma is a trans girl, and her story is told beautifully. But that's, of course, McGuire's story. So what about the story we tell? If we decide to keep Ozma having been born a girl and then transformed into a boy, Ozma's gender dysphoria might instead be some strange reminder that you can't outrun your biology. Maybe this is just me overthinking it, though. Maybe it would serve well as an allegory. But, and maybe I'm overthinking again, I think in our story, we lose a bit of her wonderful nonconformity if we ignore the fact that she enjoyed being a boy in some ways. So, I have another idea. What if she didn't have to choose? What if she could be a boy, a girl, a princess, and a prince as she wanted to? I think growing up male to then discover her own femininity gives her a unique and terribly interesting perspective of her own gender. So I think she should dress and act as she pleases, regardless of the gender associated with it. This isn't very academic of me, but wouldn't it be so wonderful to have the ruler of Oz be this beautiful, fluid person, unrestricted by the roles set in her? I love how it enforces the Land of Oz's whimsical nature, because nothing exists as a strict standard in Oz, and how it enforces her personal themes in the story, in breaking away from her servitude under Mombi. This is, of course, only my own interpretation of her character. There's an infinite number of ways to consider her, and I implore you to do the same as I've done. It's dreadfully fun, this headcanoning business. Just a minute. I'll be right back.
Got a letter for Angel Noxidire?
Oh, thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thanks. You too.
Dearest Angel, I've read over your notes you send me on Ozma. I'm always delighted whenever you send me a writing. This is no exception. I must say, though, I'm not entirely sure what the purpose is in your ponderings. Don't get me wrong, it's interesting, but I can't help but wonder why it matters so much to you. I'm sure this is terribly ignorant, but why are you so concerned with Ozma versus any wonderful original character you think up yourself? All the best, Mr. Starr. Does it matter? What's the use of adaptation? Why should we take a pre-existing character or story and change them as it suits us, rather than creating a character or story of our own? Why am I so concerned with figuring out Ozma's new identity, rather than making up a new gender-fluid character myself? Well, I think that art and media are a conversation. We can learn things about ourselves through what others have made, and make new things based on what we learned about ourselves. Adaptation continues the conversation of art. And, besides that, it's fun. Is that such a weak reason? When someone is passionate about something, it's a beautiful facet of the human condition to be able to extend that passion into creation. That doesn't solve the other question, though. Why Ozma? Why is it that I want for Ozma's and the Land of Oz's queerness to shine through? Well, I'd like to turn your attention to a series of essays entitled The Book That Made Me from Public Books. Specifically, I'd like to touch on Daniel Pollack-Pelzner's addition to the collection, The Book That Made Me a Girl. I highly recommend you read it yourself. In it, Pollack-Pelzner speaks on how when he was little reading the Oz books, he wanted to be called Dorothy, and performed femininity through the lens of Oz. One day, after going to school wearing his mother's clip-on earrings, a classmate made fun of him, forcing him into a place of rejecting his femininity in public. But, he goes on to say, in Oz, however, I could be a princess. And a character in Yellow Brick Ramble recalls their past life in America in a dream, where they say that in Oz, their lesbian relationship would be perfectly alright. This series created a home of joyful, fantastical freedom, where you don't have to bind yourself to the path society lays out for you. Pollack-Pelzner says of his connection to Oz and fantasy, it was an imaginative freedom. Freedom from an expected masculine role, freedom to journey in unexpected company. A freedom born of reading, but not bound by books. It was about choosing a more fluid first person. So then, how does one adapt Ozma? I suppose, once again, just as with everything in life, including gender itself, there doesn't need to be a single clean answer, despite how I desperately try to find it. Still, though, I think that in my own potential adaptation of the books, I'd like to let Ozma find some kind of joy in her gender, whether that be in its fluidity, or in a box she finds. It's only fair, considering the nonconformity she herself inspires. And we should let ourselves find that joy too. Thank you, and have a lovely day.